Hey, today we have Chelsea McCullough. Chelsea, tell us more about you.
Thank you. Well, I serve as Executive Director for a group called Texans for Economic Progress. So we're a statewide technology coalition, and it's my job to interface between technology communities and elected officials around tech policy.
Well, that's a big group here in Texas.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, everything impacts tech, or tech impacts everything. You know, it's a two-way relationship. So there's not anything that tech doesn't touch. So it's a big state, and it's a really big industry.
Tell us a little bit about some of the initiatives you've been working on over the last 12 months.
Sure. Well, the most exciting thing to me is to take age-old industries and talk about how tech disrupts that, and the role of policy in all of that conversation. So an example of that, we were in Houston recently, and we hosted a roundtable for technology executives around transportation. So we got everyone in a room, from the city council to the taxi cab drivers and the jitney drivers, the bike share folks, the Houston Technology Council, and around the conversation of, you know, how technology is disrupting transportation. There's the Lyft and the Ubers and all these new competitors coming into very old standard industries, and, you know, what is the responsibility of elected officials and a policy around that.
And how do you take these kinds of meetings and coalitions of people to better understand how tech's affecting these very fundamental issues for everyone? You don't have to be in tech to have an issue with transportation.
Right.
How do you translate that into informing policymakers about what to do?
That's a really good question. I've tried a couple of different things over the years, but the most successful is to really listen and find the thread of commonality. And when you think about tech entrepreneurs, you know, they're the folks in jeans and hoodies and the wild kids. And then you think about elected officials, and these are the folks in boots and khakis, and you think, how in the world can these two groups meet and understand each other? But when you think about what is best for Texas and what do they really care about, both of these groups, it's access to the fastest internet that we can find. It's access to a skilled workforce, and it's all about job creation. And having the tools to create an innovative city, state, nation, world. So if you can find some commonality in that and then expand from there, that's what I've tried, and it's working so far. Yeah.
Can you give us an example of how you've gathered the information and worked with a particular individual in the legislature or in policy making that has kind of translated into influencing a policy positively?
Well, it's not something that I was involved in directly, but I use this example a lot because I think it's the good news, and I like to tell the good stories around tech policy. The FCC recently agreed to do trials around moving to an all IP-based infrastructure. And I know that sounds a little wonky, but it basically means not investing in the age-old infrastructure of landlines and, you know, dial-ups. Less than 5% of the U.S. uses a landline singularly. So it's taking the billions of dollars that it takes to maintain those old networks and putting it towards modern networks where, you know, we can have conversations about wearables and connected cars and the massive amounts of bandwidth that it takes to prime all of that growth.
So it's not just about bringing these groups together, but you're really affecting the future well-being of these groups.
Hopefully. That's our goal, is to get people in a room and talk about the tech policy that impacts us, not just today, but 5-10 years down the road. And it's a real conversation between private sector and public sector. And a lot of times those two groups don't naturally come together. So it's our job to help find the commonality.
Well, perhaps you're a civic entrepreneur as opposed to another type of entrepreneur.
I like
and
that,
in your civic entrepreneurship and the things you've seen and done, versus here at South by Southwest, the other entrepreneurships and innovation that you've observed, can you share with us any observations for the first couple of days at South by 2014? You know,
I expected this year to be a lot more hectic. You know, all of the startup competitions, and I mean, we're so lucky to have all the accelerators here. You know, the entire world comes to Austin, Texas. But this year's felt a lot more intentional. I think, you know, whether you're an entrepreneur just launching your app or high tech and you've been doing South by from the beginning of time and everything in between, I think people are very intentional, so there's a greater sense of calm and peace. There's not like the hectic fervor that I've experienced in past years, which I think is a wonderful thing.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a great description.
Thanks.
So South by Southwest 2014,
Yeah.
the intentional conference for entrepreneurs and innovators.
Yeah. Yeah.
Chelsea, thank you so much for being with me today.
Thank you. Appreciate it.